So I heard this report, and this report has me very worried, and I'm going to be for real with you guys. An Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon is a real possibility. It just is. And the reports that we're getting seems to paint it as the United States government is more just kind of preparing for it to happen than even telling like American adversaries and allies that, okay, this is what we're going to do to stop it from happening. And the big story that people are pointing to as the scary piece of evidence is that the United States is talking to Hezbollah, which of course is an American adversary in the region. So the United States was sending cables to Hezbollah, and their cables are less about this is what we'll do to stop an Israeli attack on southern Lebanon, and more about this is what we will do to not participate in an Israeli strike on southern Lebanon, which seems to implicitly assume that an Israeli strike on southern Lebanon is certainly at least probable. Let's read a little bit of this article to talk more about it. U.S. officials are trying to prevent a bigger Middle East war or issuing an unusual warning to Hezbollah. Don't assume that Washington can stop Israel from attacking you. The American message is designed to get the Lebanese-based Shiite militia group to back down to de-escalate from the brewing crisis along the Israeli-Lebanese border, a person familiar with the discussion said. The blunt message comes as many U.S. officials appear resigned to the possibility that Israel will make a major move against Hezbollah inside Lebanon in the coming weeks. Two U.S. officials told Politico that the militia needs to also understand that Washington will help Israel defend itself if Hezbollah retaliates. They stressed that the militant group should not count on America to act as a brake on Israeli decision-making. The message is being conveyed indirectly, the person said. The U.S. doesn't engage Hezbollah on a one-on-one basis because it is a designated terrorist organization, and it relies on public communications or intermediaries. U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein and other American officials have traveled to the region in recent days to rein in both sides, even as there's growing sense in Washington and beyond that escalation is inevitable. Israel's gotta do what Israel's gotta do, a Defense Department official said. My God, what a statement. Israel is Israel. What do you want us to tell you? They're the Israelis, dog. What do you want? What do you want from them? Whoa, man. They're the Israelis. You think I'm going to mess with? Nope, I'm good. My goodness. Good cop, bad cop taken to its natural bad cop conclusion. Israel and Hezbollah have been clashing at low level for months, with exchanges of fire and targeted killings that arose with Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7th and spurred an ongoing Israeli retaliation in the Gaza Strip. The Hezbollah-Israel clashes have spiraled to new heights in recent weeks as Israel's war against Hamas has fallen in intensity. U.S. officials fear that a full-blown battle between Israel and Hezbollah, which like Hamas is backed by Iran but is stronger and better armed, could tip the region into an all-out war. That's the scenario they sought to prevent since the Israel-Hamas war erupted last October. Now, to be clear, Hezbollah has about 150,000 rockets. That is much more than the Israeli Iron Dome system can intercept. I think there's been 8 Israeli civilians killed on the border region, maybe 16 injured. I forget the exact numbers, but the number on the other side for this conflict, their most recent wave, has been like over 300 like Hezbollah soldiers and a decent chunk of civilians as well. So far Hezbollah has gotten like the worst side of this, but if they end up firing all those rockets, like they can overpower the Israeli air defense. Then again, if they fire all those rockets, then they just lost like a decade of rocket buildup. Are they going to spend it all in one batch, or are they going to send like half of them and then keep the other half to try to use as leverage to stop further Israeli advances if they move into southern Lebanon? Or if the Israelis move into southern Lebanon and they feel like they're going to lose their rocket stores, do they just use them all off in a flurry and cause a swath of civilian casualties? We think there ought to be a diplomatic resolution to the conflict across the Israel-Lebanon border that is keeping tens of thousands of families on each side of the border from returning to their homes. So on the Israeli side, I think it's about 60,000. I think on the Lebanese side, it might be about 90,000 that are displaced. I forget the exact number, but a decent amount, tens of thousands, I think like over 100,000 in total, have been displaced from their homes due to the back and forth fire between the Hezbollah and southern Lebanon border and the Israelis. So there's already been a decent amount of civilian casualties, a decent amount of military deaths. and a decent amount of refugees displaced due to the conflict, to escalate it to a wider area would certainly just make the humanitarian catastrophe much worse. Can I also just throw out there that the Israelis have tried this before? And for any of you who might not know the basics of the history here, in 2006, Israel was fighting a war in southern Lebanon. They invaded under the idea we want to push Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. We don't want these rockets. We don't want the soldiers near us. After they fought Hezbollah earlier, I think it was in the late 1990s in Israel. I mean, was it the 80s? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting all the timelines. I'm very tired. Point is, though, they had all these conflicts with Hezbollah, and then they did an operation to clear Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. And after a month, Hezbollah fought them to a standstill. And so Netanyahu would be attempting to do what Israeli leaders in the past have been unable to do. Now, obviously, if he achieved that, that'd be quite the achievement, and it could maybe reverse his political fortunes. But then again, if he ends it the same way that as previous Israeli leaders have left it, especially since he has to spread out his military resources not only in southern Lebanon, but also in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and Israel itself as well. It's a tall order. It's a difficult order. And you start to wonder why the Israelis would do it. Well, there's like a strategic interest, and if you push Hezbollah back out of southern Lebanon, then you can have parts of Israel that are much safer from Hezbollah rocket attacks. If you can put Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon, so it'll be much harder for them to do any ground attacks, not only rocket attacks, but ground attacks on Israel itself. It probably would do immense damage to the organization. It would mean they probably lose a lot of their rocket supplies. Iran would lose a powerful proxy. Maybe it would turn into a weak proxy. Maybe the proxy would go away. Either way, the Iranians would lose a lot of time, invested, effort, weapons, and a proxy ally in the region. But here's the wild card that's true for Netanyahu, but might not be true for other leaders. The longer this war goes on, the longer Netanyahu can put off the question of future elections. There have been Israelis calling for elections during the war right now. Right now. The majority of Israelis are not fans of Netanyahu and place a lot of the blame for the mismanagement that happened, that led to October 7th on his shoulders. And it's difficult for him to shake it off because there's not really many people Netanyahu can turn to and point toward, considering the fact that it was Netanyahu who helped build the security state that is in modern Israel as the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history for like the last decade. So if you built the security state for the last decade, you managed those plans, you're the ones who negotiated a deal to go into Gaza, not to go into Gaza for money and other resources, and you are the one who is leading the government. And on top of that, you're running on a security platform. If you watch Netanyahu ads, like political ads, I wonder if I can find it. This is from 9 years ago to get an idea about how long he's been pushing this message.
ממי, למתי הזמנת את הבייביסיטר? אנחנו מאחרים.
אוי, ראש הממשלה. איזה כבוד. מה אתה עושה פה?
הזמנתם בייביסיטר? קיבלתם ביביסיטר. איפה הילדים?
אבל אתה ראש הממשלה. אתה תשמור לנו על הילדים?
תראו, זה או אני, או ציפי ובוז'י.
לא. בוז'י, הילדים שלנו צריכים לשמור עליו.
עד שנחזור לא יהיה לנו בית.
הוא אפילו ימסור את השטיחים. וציפי?
ציפי, שעתיים במקום אחד.
עד שתחזרו, היא בטח כבר תעבור לשכנים. לבחירות הקרובות, אתם בוחרים מי ישמור על הילדים שלנו. לבחירות הקרובות, מצביעים רק הליכוד. די, ציפי.
שלום.
לא בכל תנאי.
Now, this one doesn't do it as much as the other one. The other one like had him on the beach looking at binoculars. He was everywhere at once, and the whole point was his eyes are everywhere. But this is the same general theme that Netanyahu will protect you. Netanyahu's got his eyes, then Yahoo will handle it. And when that's your shtick, is like, I will provide the security, I will deal with it, I'll keep you safe. Maybe the like all this like judicial independence stuff, maybe we'll touch a little bit here. Maybe we'll change it when it comes to, ignore my corruption. At the end of the day, I keep you safe. And when you're Israel, surrounded by states that historically have been very hostile to your existence, it can be an appealing message to Israeli voters. Probably not going to be as appealing if the security state you built up failed after it was given warnings by multiple parties, including the Egyptians and possibly even the United States. Not good stuff. Anyway, because that message is kind of hard to upkeep right now, and once the war is immediately over, there's going to be a huge upsurge in calls for another election, calls to get rid of Netanyahu. Certainly since his coalition government was literally on the brink of falling apart like a week and a half ago. I think there is a political incentive to keep it going until eventually he can find some jump off point to stay in power. Either some win through maybe defeating Hezbollah, at least pushing them out of southern Lebanon, or finding some other way to spin something as a win, or to find some other jumping off point where he can stay in power. Or maybe at the very least avoid corruption charges, as Netanyahu is still having to deal with those corruption charges nipping at his heels the whole time as extra motivation. Point is, though, there are other motivations outside of just pure Israeli state interests that could be clouding the judgment of Israeli leadership that makes it even more difficult for me to really say what the Israelis are going to do in southern Lebanon. Because I could talk about well, what about all the rocket damage and the fact that the Israeli air defense systems just cannot deal with 150,000 rockets at the same time? If they'll simply overpower the system. Well, what about the upsurge in terror attacks, or the upsurge in this, or the instability it would cause, or the damage it would cause to homes in northern Israel and southern Lebanon, and the humanitarian catastrophe, how stretched thin the Israeli army would have to be, the calling up of more reservists, how it's still a question mark how the Israeli public would even react to an operation, especially if it doesn't go the right way. If he has other motivations outside of statecraft that he's considering, like his own political interest, it becomes much harder to exactly gauge what he's going to do in response to this. Which is why right now I'm still in a state of I don't know. I really don't. And that scares me.
Rosetum287 has donated $5. It's a Ponzi scheme. Lie and steal. Dylan running for president.
Lie, cheat, and steal, okay? I want to have the same platform as Eddie Guerrero. Thank you for the $5.